people have a lot of very strong opinions, and they share those strong opinions and they differ. That makes it really hard to figure out who's right. It's not necessarily who's right or wrong. It comes down to, what does your pet need? They don't know you. They don't know your pet. If you're trying to wonder if this is just marketing, if anyone says like something is downright evil, that's probably a red flag. Now, it's my job to care about what every dog and every cat need out there, but pet owners don't. Like, you just need to know what's right for your pet. And so that can help start to eliminate some of the complexities, because the people that are voicing their opinions, they're speaking very generally. And so they don't know you, they don't know your pet. And so it's really important to make sure that you center back to that value. That is the most important thing.
Welcome to the DAFY Podcast, the place where you will get expert-led and science-backed advice on dog health and nutrition. No more confusion and no more conflicting opinions. Just clear guidance to help you make informed decisions for your pup. Because when it comes to our dogs, they deserve the very best care. And we, as dog parents, deserve confidence in the choices we make for them. Let's meet an expert. Megan, welcome to the DAFY Podcast. It's so great to have you on today.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, you're so very welcome. I'm actually even more excited because you are my first board-certified vet nutritionist on the DAFY Podcast, one of many. Nevertheless, very excited. So yeah, I mean, how I start my podcast normally is I always ask the guests, what is it that made you kind of like fall in love with dog nutrition in the first place?
Oh, goodness. Well, it's a little bit of a long story, and it doesn't start with dogs. So I am one of those very traditional veterinarians where I knew from a young age that I wanted to go into veterinary medicine, but my interest was really around marine mammals and zoo type of animals. And so honestly, even during high school, maybe even before that, I was getting experience in those different types of animals. So everything from going to SeaWorld career camps and different conservation efforts. But while I was pursuing experience with those different types of animals, what I found was that a lot of the times it came back to the nutrition that they ate, right? Because especially if they're in captivity in some sort, or even when I was in Zambia with the Elephant Orphanage Project, which we were out in the bush, right? We still had to make sure that they ate and had good nutrition. And we even found links to nutrition and certain health concerns. So I kind of found that this was such a central part of taking care of animals and how it impacted them in multiple different ways. And the other things that I found that kind of called to who I was and what I was interested in is in zoo medicine, the nutrition is linked to a lot of other things, including how we train them for husbandry behaviors. So that's where the veterinarian can actually do physical exams, administer different treatments or medications. And now in very good zoos, we train animals to do that completely awake. And so that's all through understanding nutrition and food motivation. And we also had to do a lot of engagement with these animals to encourage natural behaviors. And that got to be where we had to be very creative in how we placed the different food items or introducing new ones. And so there was like this creativity element of it. There was problem solving. I saw how much it impacted the animal, everything from health, but overall well-being. And so that's really what it attracted me to nutrition. And then being a veterinarian and going down that road, really the best option was to do a residency in nutrition. And so that was the direction I went. And the residency that I entered was a small animal clinical nutrition residency. So that's really cats and dogs. And even though I still had that interest, that's what I got exposed to majorly. And I found out I like dogs too. I like dogs and cats. So I kind of stuck with it. And that's where I've been ever since residency, which I finished that back in 2017. So it's been a little while since I've finished my residency. But that's where I got interested into nutrition.
I love that. I love that. And you were talking about as well, like, using food and things like that to build the relationship with animals as well. I think that's such a huge part, isn't it? Especially with cats and dogs, is how much we use food to have that relationship and that bonding with them. And I think that's amazing, especially when you have food motivated dogs or cats.
Yes.
Cats is like another another subject, but at least dogs, most of the times, you can really use food, and that relationship basically can link back to nutrition really nicely, which is really good. And so what does a board certified vet nutritionist do? So what is your role, and how does that differ from a normal vet?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, similarly to other specialists within veterinary medicine, so the example that I would give would be like an internist. So, if you take your dog to an internist as a specialist, other ones like cardiologists, neurologists, those are all of our sister specialties because we sit under the internal medicine college. So, a very similar education track. So there's at least 1 year of internship, and then kind of depending on the program, 2 to 4 years of residency. And so that's a lot of additional training specifically focused in that topic. So for nutrition, it's completely focused on nutrition. So that's, again, a lot of additional education and time dedicated to a specific aspect of health. And so, again, nutrition is very important. It's throughout and connects to a lot of other different health concerns. So we often work with a lot of other specialties too, supporting them in the care of the patient. So and I love the question because I think a lot of people don't always know, okay, so what does a boarded veterinary nutritionist do versus like a PhD in nutrition or some of these other areas of nutrition? And you remember that the board certified veterinary nutritionist is a veterinarian. So they went through vet school just like other veterinarians, and we look at things from that clinical health aspect. So we do all of that training plus all these years of additional training specifically in nutrition. But we think very clinical, because that's what our training is. So it's like, what does a particular animal patient need? And we know all the medical aspects of things. As much as I hate it, pharmacology, all of those things as well.
Strange words.
So that's our training. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. And it goes to show, doesn't it? Because I think so many times, like, the word board certified vet nutritionist gets thrown around. And I think we live in a world right now, today we're talking about, dog nutrition advice that we currently have nowadays in the world that we live in today. And I feel like board certified vet nutritionists, they don't get enough credit around how much time they need to study to gain that title. It is possibly, I would say, the highest level you could get into, within this industry in terms of qualification to be able to give nutritional advice to, pet owners, work in a pet hospital and things like that. But I think that would be the top possible. And, in Europe is the one in London, Royal College of London. But it is the highest possible qualification you can have in this industry, I think. And correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot of schooling for sure. I think that PhD nutritionists also have a lot of schooling too, because they're doing PhDs. So they did undergrad, and they did, about 4 years. I'm sure it depends on the program of also additional training, but it is a little bit different, right? Like, they are not veterinarians. They aren't thinking clinically. They're thinking like PhDs. They're thinking like food science. And yes, they do understand health of the animal. They get a little bit of that, but it is a little bit different perspective than a doctor, right? Like, a veterinary doctor. That technically PhD does mean doctor. So it is a little bit different of mindset. And like, I've noticed as I've worked on the industry side of things ever since I finished my residency, like it is a whole different role, but both are needed, right? Like I've had a little bit of training in formulating, especially like homemade diets. That's, bread and butter for a board certified veterinary nutritionist, but we don't go through how to make a kibble work, right? We know the nutrients, we know what dogs and cats need, but like how to actually make something go through a machine and pop out and taste good and, keep its form and all of that, like that's a PhD nutritionist that doing food science. So it's a little bit different.
Yes, absolutely. Did you say you did a PhD as well?
No.
Okay,
Thank you. That's enough school.
Yeah, that's another probably like 4 years, isn't it? Or 5 years on top. Yeah.
There are
No,
a few, and they tend to be in
yeah.
academia, but yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting, isn't it? Because there are also like, you have that from a kind of like academia perspective, but then you also have a lot of technically what I was before I started doing my master, certified canine nutritionist. And that that's kind of like what I wanted to kind of get to is, the difference between someone like yourself that has to be in university for at least 10 years to become who you are versus being able to just get a certification that many times could have been created by someone that care about dogs but not necessarily like cares about the science as much, and then they can still call themselves as a certified canine nutritionist. They can still formulate diets legally and give them to dog owners. I mean, yes, there is a little bit of emphasis that you could only formulate for healthy dogs, but nevertheless, I think you could put in danger a healthy dog if you don't really know and you don't have kind of like the basic knowledge on how to formulate a good diet. So it's interesting. There are so many people right now like that dog owners have access to, and I think it's good for people to know the differences between someone like yourself versus someone else that maybe had a lot less qualifications and they're still doing technically what you do with dog owners. Why do you think, like dog nutrition advice nowadays for dog owners has become so confusing and so like all over the place?
Also a good question. And I was just interviewed for another podcast, and that was their very first question as well. So I know this is challenging, and they only gave me a couple minutes to answer. So I'll actually take a little bit more time to go into
Take your time. Yeah.
So there's a lot of factors which probably contribute to some of the complexity. And especially if we're thinking about today, there are so many options out there. And so that itself, if you walk into a pet food or just go on Chewy, is very overwhelming in the amount of options. And so I think that's one element. The other element, and this is in a way, it's really good, but I think people care more. They care more about what they feed their pet. And so there's that additional level of stress and care that go into, okay, now this is really complex. It feels complex because I care and I want to make sure I make the right decision. And that's great because I think a lot of pet owners now know that investing in nutrition is one of the best proactive things that they can do for their long-term health of their pet. And so to that, like I love it. Like that's so great. But I think that does contribute to sometimes that feeling overwhelm and complexity. And I think another thing is that along with all of that, people have a lot of very strong opinions, and they share those strong opinions and they differ. And so that makes it really hard to figure out like, okay, so who's right? And when it comes down to it, I think it's not necessarily who's right or wrong. I think it comes down to what does your pet need? Now, it's my job to care about what every dog and every cat need out there. Pet owners don't. Like, you just need to know what's right for your pet. That is the most important thing. And so that can help start to eliminate some of the complexities, because the people that are voicing their opinions, they're speaking very generally, usually. And so they don't know you, they don't know your pet. And so it's really important to make sure that you center back to that value and that most important need to help you go down and figure your way through this jungle of pet nutrition these days.
Yeah, I love that. That's such an important point, isn't it? And it's just that's one of the things when my clients ask me, what's the best diet for my dog? And I always answer, it depends. And that word I just use all the time now. It just depends, basically. And the reality is, I think dog owners starting to understand every single dog is different. And a dog that might work for my dog might not work for your dog. And we do know that now, right? It doesn't, yes, of course you have the genetics, you've got the different, like environment and things like that. But you have to look at the dog in front of you fundamentally to be able to decide what the best diet is. There isn't just an answer that will work for every single dog. And so how would you go about helping a dog owner to find that kind of more of an individualized kind of diet for their dog?
Yeah, I always and I'm sorry if I feel like a broken record. I haven't
No, please.
spoken to your audience yet,
I am
but
as well.
it goes back to your veterinarian, because between you and your veterinarian, who is able to do the physical exam, ask you a ton of questions about your pet, know their health, they're able to help narrow down what your pet needs. And so we talk about a nutritional assessment in veterinary medicine. So they need to look at body condition score, age, muscle condition score, any other health concerns. But also another thing that maybe we forget about sometimes is also you as the pet owner. What is your scenario? Like what is your lifestyle? Because that's also really important to incorporate into a diet decision. If you are on the road 9 months out of the year, there's going to be some diets that are going to be really hard to manage and keep up with if you're like living out of an RV or, something like that. So those types of things are all important to take into account. And really the veterinary team is one of the best to sit down and have that conversation with from the start.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. And in the case that where you don't have a vet that specializes in nutrition, so they might have generic knowledge about nutrition, do you think the right thing to do will always be to, reach out to a vet nutritionist to, especially if you have like a dog in front of you where you really do need the advice? Is the right thing to do to always, maybe get your vet to work with a vet nutritionist together to define what that looks like based on your dog? Or is there any scenario that you think is not needed to just speak to a vet nutritionist and you can just say, look, my dog is healthy, I can just go for any diet as long as it works for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is good, like if you have that interest, to ask a veterinary nutritionist, bring it up with your veterinarian. It's something else that I'm working on, is trying to increase the awareness and help veterinarians know that veterinary nutritionists are here and we can work with them. But you don't necessarily need to always, call a nutritionist, especially for a healthy pet. Your veterinarian has gone through veterinary school. They can look at some of these things. You're right. They aren't nutritionists. There's a reason that we exist, but they can really help you, again, identify these things to look for in a diet. This is what is about your pet. Are they overweight? Do we need to look at calorie control? Like those kind of things. They can help with that. Now, if you're interested in a different format or a different thing that your veterinarian isn't quite sure about, that might be an opportunity to reach out to someone who has a little bit more nutrition training. But you can always double check it with your vet too, because they also are pretty aware of major watch outs. So they can help kind of gauge or say, that seems reasonable. So you can definitely expand your team when it comes to finding the right answer. But again, your veterinary team can definitely help you find some key points to know what I should be looking for my pet in particular.
Yeah. And I found as well that, the more you talk to vets, I got my dog Rusty 7 years ago now, almost. And the conversation is starting to change massively compared to what their recommendation was 7 years ago. There was very much a closed mind about recommendations. And I feel vets are becoming more open because obviously fresh food, whether we like it or not, is becoming more popular. And that is the reality of it. I think it comes from the fact that it is becoming really important for us humans, and we're seeing the benefits in a kind of human science. And so we want to take that as pet parents who absolutely love their dogs into their nutrition as well. And I feel the more I'm chatting to vets, the more they're very open to, as long as the company's got, some kind of research behind them, some kind of real good formulator, experienced expert formulator, they are a lot more open about having these conversations compared to many years ago. So,
Yeah. I think they understand that there's a lot more options now too.
Yes.
Which makes it intimidating for them because they can't keep up, right? I mean, honestly, I do this every single day and there's still diets out there that I have never heard of before. So it's completely understandable. Yes, I agree. I have found a lot of veterinarians that are more open. One thing that you can do is be open and transparent with your veterinarian. If you're interested in something, just ask. I think that's the other thing, is don't be afraid to bring something up. And I understand, when I go to my own doctor, sometimes I feel intimidated and I am another doctor, right? You can feel intimidated to bring something up, but they're there to support you. So if you have questions, I think, just don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Completely agree. Yeah. And I think actually vets really like that when you have a proactive dog owner, they already look at you in a different way. And they're very open. I find most of the time it's like if they don't know the answer to something, they say, "I'll go and find out." Or they're very like straight away, I will let you know. But they're just never defensive. And at the end of the day, I think the vet, again, I bring it back to what you see online, because online you can see so much hate on vets. Who at the end of the day, I love vets, right? Like they decided to do this job because they absolutely adore animals. Like you can't take that away from them. And the reality is you just need to, if you can find an information that was not made available to them, bring it to them. They would check it, right? And, they would do their own research, and then they would just give you their, recommendation based on their experience and their, studies that they've done, the way they can read research better than, a normal dog owner because they've been to vet school and things like that. So yeah, I totally agree on that. I love that. And when we talk about, like, because we have so many options on the market now, like dog owners have kibbles, cold press, gently cooked, homemade, raw feeding. There are so many options. How can a dog owner evaluate a pet food to be able to make a decision? Because the reality of it is, and me coming on the background, I just finished my master at an Italian university, and we've done a lot of work on reading pet food labels. And the reality of it is there is so much stuff out there that is quite concerning, because dog owners can just, they don't know how to evaluate a pet food. When you actually go with your knowledge and look at, everything that is in the label or about the company and things like that, there are very concerning things. And I think a pet food can get on the market really easily without very, very, very strict checks, right? So, regardless of this kind of like processing type of the food, what would your recommendation be for a dog owner when they are evaluating a pet food for the dog?
Yeah, you make some really good points. And unfortunately, there's very limited information on the label that's actually helpful when it comes to looking at a pet food. And that's a very discouraging comment, I understand. But you have to think about that all of those different formats of food, one kibble is not the same as another. So it's not just about format of the food. Yes, I currently work for a fresh food dog company. So, we do believe in benefits of fresh food, but there's a lot more to it. There's a lot of companies out there now making fresh dog food. Why start another one? And it's because we believe that there were some opportunities that we can innovate and add more to the market. So, you mentioned some earlier, like understanding who is part of the, not just making the food, but the entire process. Like you said, it's not hard to get a food to market, and you're absolutely true. I'll tell a story. This was a long time ago, at least a decade probably. And I was at a veterinary conference, and there was I will not give the name, but there was a newer pet food on the market, and they had, I do commend them that they showed up at a veterinary conference and sponsored a breakfast talk. And it was one of the founders, who is not a veterinary professional, got up there and said how easy it was for him to get a license to sell food in his particular state. And I just sat there going, you just admitted that in front of a bunch of veterinary professionals. So anyway, it is not hard to get a license to sell pet food. And it's not, there's lower barriers. But to make a really good pet food that is safe, that is doing what it says it's going to do, that fits your dog or helps you figure out if the food is right for your dog, that is really hard. And so making sure that their team is made up of people who know what they're doing when it comes to all of those elements. So yes, formulation, PhD nutritionist, board certified veterinary nutritionist, and ideally, the more full-time they are, the better, because they have committed, they've at least seen enough value in the company to be a full employee of that company. And that means that they're there all the time to support every part of the process. But in addition to that, there's a lot of that food safety aspect of things too. So while both of those types of people can help a little bit, that still can be that is a full-time job for someone. There are people that actually go to school to know about food safety and all of those processes, and to connect it back to the regulatory side of pet food, which again, that is a person goes and studies that, which is crazy, but to think about. But that is really important to make sure that everything they say is within the legal guidelines that you can say, all of those things. So I think that helps, is to know who is supporting the process, that you feel confident that they know what they're doing, and that they're willing to talk with you. That's actually something that we're doing a lot of right now. I'm constantly with the customer service team, making sure that we're supporting people on knowing the right diet, how much to feed, all of those things. So if you are having trouble like calling them and getting support, that might be a concern. Like, you know, and I don't want to discourage small companies that have limited teams, but that's something to think about, especially if you think your pet has special, like certain needs that you have to have questions about. So, and that takes work. So that's the other thing too, is like if you're getting overwhelmed by marketing, take a hot minute and use AI. Google's like, so yesterday, I think now, but search it a little bit. And again, ask your vet, just have a gut check, and they'll probably tell you some of the things that they look for, which are the things I just spoke about. The things that you mentioned, having a little bit more data behind it. Have they actually fed these to dogs, and is it actually digestible? Like those kinds of things. All of those things can help you feel a little bit more comfortable. And then at the end of the day, there's still going to be some individual variability. Doesn't mean that the company is bad, necessarily, but it's okay that if you have the dream to feed a particular diet and your dog starts to have loose stool, make sure it's not just a transition thing, but your dog is going to be an individual. So there might be a little bit of trial and error.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you made incredibly important points. I think what you said about as well, the feeding amounts, that's one thing I always see, like it's just always a range. And in the last year and a half, having, been at uni and, I'm formulating all the time, you learn about the importance of calories, right? We live in a world where over 50% of our pets are overweight or obese, and there is so little kind of like knowledge sharing around, okay, your dog is 10 kilos, this is their activity level. This is like, there is just normally a guide, like a guidance of how much you should feed based on a weight range, and then adjust it if needed. And I'm like, that doesn't really help a dog owner. That's it, because it's like, oh yeah, let's add a little bit more, let's add a little bit less. But how do you know your dog is actually getting all the nutrients in the right quantity in their body every single day? And that's the thing that I feel like still missing right now. There are loads of different variations, right, based on your dog's, it's not just the activity level, it's health status, nutrient status. There are loads of different, and that's kind of what I like about some of these gently cooked companies that have an expert behind them, because they do enable a little bit of more of personalized approach, right? You can enter the dog details, the exact weight, their activity level, the nutrient status, and then you know that the calories are being calculated better than just buying the food in the shop and just randomly feeding an amount, basically. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, there are so many things you could talk about labels and things like that. But I loved all your points. And from a perspective of processing, another conversation that I see all the time, there is such a big disconnection between, because obviously kibble has been around longer, right? There is a lot more science. The biggest companies are kibble companies, right? The big names are in vets practices are big companies. When we talk about processing, and I know we had this chat kind of like briefly, and I spoke to another wonderful researcher as well. But from your perspective and experiencing, right, it's such a black and white kind of conversation. Where do we draw a line around what's good, what's bad, what's to be concerned? Do we have the answer from the science? I know I asked you lots of questions at once, but you know what I mean.
I'll back up. You made a great point that kibble has been around for a long time. And so there is a lot of research behind kibble, right? That doesn't mean that aren't constantly learning things every single day when it comes to science and research, right? So that is a good thing that these companies continue to do research. And you always want a company who's willing to say, hey, we learned this new thing, and so we're going to implement what we learned, right? Don't pick on someone who like says they changed their mind because they saw research, right? Like that, you want somebody who's going to be honest and is looking into it and will modify things as they learn. So that is a truth there. When it comes to processing, this is something that is really not officially defined in pet food. So we need to say that to make sure that there's really no one guiding thing that is defining somebody using the term processing. Now, I've looked into this on the human side. And I don't even know if it's super official, but at least a group of people came together and decided what they were going to define as processing of human food. And it is much more than heat. I hear a lot of people talking about heat when it comes to processing. So that's where I think a lot of the gently cooked, comes into that is like they're emphasizing a temperature factor. But processing is more than temperature. It's how long it's been under certain temperatures. It's pressure. So there's more pressure and force, and that can contribute to processing. And in human food, they also define processing as additives and sometimes certain types of fats or oils. And remember that, cats and dogs are fed very differently than people. Cats and dogs, because we know so much and they are not as opposed to eating similar things every single day, we can make a complete and balanced diet for them. People try to get somebody to eat one thing every single day, and it's not going to work. We have too many taste buds, and we're too particular, and food is abundant, right? So having that, so that's something also to consider when we are taking what we think about from human food and applying it to pet food. So there's a lot of different elements, and how do you measure that? Yes, we can measure temperature and how long it's been under temperature, but we don't really know how does that impact the food. And ultimately what we really care about is how does that impact the pet long term. So we are now doing more research and trying to figure that out, and that's where we had our conversations about AGEs. And this is still a very relatively new science in pet food. And there are a couple of people. I introduced you to my go-to person when it comes to AGEs and what that means. But again, we're still learning. There's only been really a few studies looking at different types of food and the amount of AGEs. And even that expert, she's like, it's not like all AGEs are bad. It's more complex than that. So there's a lot of complexity to it. I think, there's a few things that we can look at. Some people really hone in on the digestibility element, but even that is a little complex. You can't just say, well, this diet is more digestible. You can make a diet really digestible, but it has zero fiber in it. And we know fiber is good too, right? But fiber is going to impact total digestibility because fiber isn't digested by the animal. It's digested by its microorganisms inside, which is all beneficial. But so I'm probably just making this all more complex, but it's important to know that things are not always black and white. And one of my watch outs too, if you're trying to wonder if this is just marketing, if anyone says something is downright evil, that's probably a red flag. They are really trying to pull out emotions. And that, not just black and white, that's downright demonizing something. That's probably a red flag. So
like a fear mongering, isn't it? Every single time I see a fear mongering ad or fear mongering at the back of, I came across the other day a UK supplement that they launched for dogs. I'm not going to name it. But I think their main product front label was the only supplement your dog will ever need. Now processed. I was like, excuse me, the only supplement that your dog will ever need. That is such a strong statement to make. And obviously it has lots of mushrooms powder, all the good stuff that we know that can be beneficial for dog, right? But it's a strong statement and I didn't like it. And that already kind of like, it was a red flag for me, because you cannot say that, because that's not true, and it's not true for every dog. And yeah, so I totally agree with you. Fear mongering is huge right now. And I think that's kind of what the bigger thing we need to look at. And I think going back quickly to what you said about the processing, Siobhan's study, she's done a study. She's the lady that in the US that is studying AGs in pets food. And actually, when I was reading that study, it's quite interesting, because you think kibble is a lot more processed than a wet diet. But when you actually go and look into it, a wet diet is more processed than kibble technically, because it needs to be sterilized more. Kibble gets cooked a lot quicker, higher temperature, but a lot quicker. So that's all of the small little things that we need to think about. Because it's so easy to say, oh yeah, kibble is the enemy, kibble is ultra processed. But the reality of it is, even a gently cooked diet is processed technically,
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's some processing that's really good. Like we want to cook. Sorry for the raw feeders. We want to cook food because that kills bacteria, right? Like there's some processing that is very good. But, back to that study, and it's a great study. We have to start somewhere, but you also have to remember she looked at a very limited number of each types of category, and going back to remember that one kibble is not the same as another, right? So you still have to keep that into context too. So all study or all research is limited to some capacity, right? And Siobhan is very open and transparent. That's why I love her so much, is she will be very honest about what she knows and what she doesn't know about the research. So, but yes, it is if that surprised you, right? You might think that kibble is it might have the most AGEs or not, but that's not what that study found, looking at those two, one kibble and one canned diet. So again, things are a lot more complex than they initially sound, or which is what marketing is trying to do. And I totally understand that, having the diverse background that I have and being able to understand how do you sell or anything, honestly. They are trying to simplify it because they have a short amount of time to try to convince you to buy something. So when they try to simplify it, which is very hard, especially when it comes to science and health, it's going to sound like those things. So yeah, it is a lot more complicated. This is why, again, working with your veterinary team, doing a little bit more research into the company and the particular product too. Again, does that match your dog, your lifestyle, all of those things is going to be helpful. And so yes, it's a little bit more time consuming than the impulse buy, but ultimately that is the best way.
Yes, no, I totally agree. Yeah, thank you so much for making that point. That I think that it's really useful to add that. And I think you're right about what you said about Siobhan. I listened to a training session that she did, and she was very much, all the questions she was getting, she was like, actually, I don't have enough data. And that I respect that very much, compared to someone that would say make conclusions based on not real data, right? So yeah. And I think, like you said, this evolving all the time. It might be that in 3 months' time, things will change again. So yeah, I think it's always important to keep ourselves as informed as we can, because things are moving quickly forward every day. And just a question about homemade diets. So we spoke a lot about commercial food. What is your, honest view on if a dog owner wanted to move away from commercial for different reasons, whether dog's health or whether they just wanted to take, control of what they put in their dog's bowl? What is your view on homemade diets, and what do you wish dog owners understand better around this type of diet?
Yeah. And just a reminder, so again, my clinical nutrition residency, a lot of that was formulating homemade diets. No, of course, most of that are for patients who are not healthy. They have often very complex medical issues, and that there wasn't a commercial diet for. So, I mean, I am familiar with that. I see it, that it has a lot of value for a lot of dogs. There were some that I just wanted so much to put it on a commercial diet, and it needed a homemade diet. So that was the answer. So I see the benefits in homemaking these fresh options. The challenge, which again, with that knowledge and me knowing formulation software, there's a couple of watch outs. One is, when we formulate that diet, it needs to be exactly followed to that recipe. Any type of modification. So if we say 70 lean beef, it needs to be 70% lean beef, not 95. Like you've totally changed the nutrient profile. So it's really strict. It's very it's trying to be as precise as possible. And one good thing to watch out for is if you see a recipe that is confusing, like if it says, like if it's not giving you very precise amounts, like grams, or sorry if that unit does not convert we're behind in America, like very, very specific instructions, that is a red flag. If it's too open to interpretation, that is a red flag for that recipe. So that's one thing to watch out for, and how intentionally it is designed, which always made us nervous. And the other thing, and this is true for commercial, this is why it's so important to have people who know what they're doing and testing the product. Even if you are following a recipe to the T, we have designed this to be beautiful on paper. It doesn't mean that it is a perfect representation of those ingredients, even as precise as we're trying. So I actually know a lot of nutritionists who they actually build this into their fee, is to have it sent out to make sure that it is meeting the nutrient parameters that they're trying to meet.
Interesting.
So there's a lot of like scary wiggle, like when you know too much, it's scary.
Yeah.
There's a little, there is that little bit of uncertainty of the complete and balanced nature, or not even complete and balanced. Like for us, if we're doing something that's for a health concern, like even more, we're a little bit more paranoid because we need it to be very specific in certain areas. So there's those things to think about when it comes to homemaking diet. And you can probably testify on, it is harder than it sounds when it comes to homemaking food that is balanced. I won't put words in your mouth. Is it hard for you?
Oh my goodness. Can I tell you a little story? So
Please.
When I started this journey with Rusty, I was like, I'm just going to buy a license for the software. I'm just going to do it myself. I was used to to be able to make a diet complete and balanced, I needed I'm not joking, at least 18 ingredients. And that was just just the thing that would meet the complete and balanced kind of formulation of the recipe. Now, first of all, I think going back, let's fast forwarding to now, I think less is better. I think there are so many recipes I see every single day with 15 supplements and, 12 different whole food ingredients. First of all, I'm like, how will a dog owner follow these unless they're doing nothing else than cooking for their dog, being able to follow these, by the grams, like you said, with the exact, amount and things like that. And I think that there is a lot of, confusion around when to add the supplements in, because that's another thing. I see loads of recipes online. Yeah, just add the supplements and then freeze it and then, go and reheat it. So they're all little minor things that will impact the nutritional value of that recipe that is not talked about. And so going back to now and how I formulate, I generally, I don't want more than 6 ingredients in my diet. That includes, whole food, seed oil, because obviously we know linoleic acid is an essential fatty acid for dogs, and one multivitamin and mineral that I know will balance the recipe, because that's another word, right, to talk about, is how many multivitamins and multiminerals, because that's the question dog owners ask, is what are the nutrients that I'm missing? What can I buy to complete my dog's diet? And I'm like, they are not all the same. The amount of supplements that claim to be vitamin and minerals to complete a homemade diet that I was putting in my software, they do not balance the recipe. So you think, oh, I'm buying this, I'm putting it on that food every day, my dog is getting everything they need, unless it's been added to a recipe and you have the full nutritional breakdown of that supplement, you cannot be sure. And even then, like you said, the best way of checking that would be to send that food off to a lab and, receive a report that that's actually what's in the food. So it's tough. It's really, really, really tough. And that's just the part of actually doing it, right? The formulation part, and really putting the thought of working with the dog in front of you, make sure the diet is not too high in fat, not too high in fiber, respecting the age of the dog and their life stage, their activity level, making sure they don't overeat, because that's the difficult part, isn't it? And then, yeah, that's kind of my story. So I think less is best with a homemade diet, but it has to be formulated by a professional. And even myself, I always check my recipes if I need to put them out there with a vet nutritionist, because they have way different knowledge than I have been, having been in vet school for 5 years and studying nutrition.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You just proved my point. So, no, there's a lot of complexity to it. And I think, I'm sure people are interested in homemade diets. And yes, the interest has risen. I hear this a lot from veterinarians that they're seeing a lot more people on homemade diets. And I'm sure there's multiple reasons that people might be interested in that. It may sound healthier. It may sound cheaper. I promise you it is probably not cheaper than a commercial option. And so it, depending on your reason, but yeah, it's a lot more time consuming, complex. There are concerns with it if not done well, just to kind of be aware of before you just jump right in.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that's the education that is needed, because at the end of the day, I feel like when I look back at myself 5 years ago, I was like, what's the worst that can happen? Just give them a little bit of this, a little bit of that. They'll get the nutrients eventually. But the reality of it is they are not like us. They cannot pick what they want to eat. It's never going to be varied enough. And then another thing is that there is just not enough mineral and vitamins and essential fatty acid in whole food for a dog. For a dog's diet, there just isn't. It's impossible unless you formulate with 20 ingredients, and then the diet will become really complicated. If something is not working, you don't know what that is because you've got too much there. But also, I think from a palatability perspective, is you're just adding so much. It can be really fatty. It can be change the taste of the food for the dog. So it's not that nice, is it?
Yeah.
But anyway, no, thank you. I really appreciate that, because coming from you, it's just a really, really important point to make, I think, and there is not enough awareness around this. So thank you for that. So look, I don't want to keep you too long, but if there is, is there any other kind of piece of advice that, you would like to give a dog owner when we talk about dog nutrition?
Yeah. If you are listening to this podcast, I know you care about nutrition, and that I love that. Thank you so much for caring. I pretty much dedicated my career to this. So thank you for acknowledging the importance of nutrition. I also know that it can seem really complex, and I want to acknowledge that as well. Hopefully some of the things that we've talked about is helpful. Remember to leverage your veterinary team as an ally when it comes to finding a good option. And maybe we should stop using the term best, maybe, so it doesn't feel so intimidating, because there are options, which means probably that there's multiple really good options that work for your dog. So give yourself some grace. Make sure that you are monitoring what you decide to feed, because I think that's another thing people forget about, is they spend all this time trying to find the diet, and they've chosen the diet and it seems to be going well. Their dog is eating it. Their poops seem good. But if you're not kind of monitoring, you may not notice subtle weight gain, or even, and I've seen this too, weight loss. So it's always really good to at least check in and watch your dog's weight and body condition score, because monitoring is worth so much. If you're only checking in once a year, that's a lot of time to not be looking, and missed opportunities to tweak to make sure you're getting things correct. So please don't be afraid to ask questions. And one thing I did want to mention is that a lot of veterinarians are often being taught to make specific food recommendations, because that is what they think people want. If they make a recommendation and you're kind of like, don't be afraid to say, I hear what you're saying, but this is my concern. Is there another option? Don't be afraid to say that, because again, they might be doing what they think they're supposed to be doing. And if it's not helpful, if it's missing some type of value for you, please don't be afraid to speak up. And if they make you feel bad, I'm sorry, I love my colleagues, but find another veterinarian. I want you to feel comfortable going to your veterinary team. So ultimately find the veterinary team that fits you and your pet too.
Yeah, that's good advice. Thank you so much. That's really, really good. And Megan has a wonderful podcast as well. What is the name of it, just in case anyone wants to go and check it out after today?
Yeah. So it's called Vet Life Reimagined. So this is where I interview veterinary professionals from across, honestly, the world. I do have some representatives from different countries as well, but I like to highlight all the amazing, incredible things that veterinary professionals do in the world. And so if you're interested in the veterinary community, like what we do every single day and all the different things that we do, feel free to check out Vet Life Reimagined. I would love that. I'm on audio and YouTube as well, so whatever you prefer.
Add a link to the podcast in the show notes. And do you do consultations with dog owners directly? Is that something you offer?
Not currently. So,
Okay.
I mean, so I work for my golden child. So if for some reason you're on my golden child, I'm definitely happy to help you with that. But I don't do direct consultations. Ask your veterinary team. They may work with one in particular. But if you're having trouble finding someone, let me know. There are boarded nutritionists out there that do direct consultation. So I'm happy to point you in the right direction.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Megan. I really, really love chatting to you. I mean, we have a part 2 already booked in, which I'm really excited about anyway. But I found today's conversation amazing. I knew I was going to love it. Yeah, just thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. And thank you so much for listening. And we will see you on the next episode. Thank you for watching. If you found this episode helpful, follow us on Instagram. And if you want first access to DAFY, join our waitlist now. The links are in the show notes.